Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Rangers Daily Briefing for Thursday, the 2nd of June. A slightly later time than usual, but we're here to talk all things Rangers. Apologies if you've been waiting for our video, but we're here now, so all well and good. Before we talk all things Rangers, of course, you can see on your screen, firstly, the ticker down below. We've got that great offer on the website, just £6 for 6 months worth of content. You pay your £6, that's you sorted for a half a year. It really is a fantastic offer. We're literally giving the content away. Just head over to rangersreview.co.uk/subscribe for all the details. And as you can see as well on your screen, the One Football app. It's your one-stop shop for all your footballing needs. It's available not only for iPhone, but for Android users as well. You can keep up to date with all the latest goings on at Ibrox. There's loads of Rangers content on there, including Rangers Review articles. Not only Rangers, you can keep up to date with fixture lists and other clubs in and around Scotland and also down south. And if you want to as well, you can keep abreast of all that's going on across the pond in the continent also. So it's your one-stop shop for all your footballing needs, and it's totally free, which is the most important thing. So go and download it now, folks. It's very much recommended, the One Football app. Okay, Johnny, people have logging in, so many comments coming in already to talk all things Rangers. The big news yesterday, there's no doubt about it, Connor Goldson signing that new deal. Folks, if you haven't seen a reaction video to that, then I'd urge you to go and check it out. We did a special video yesterday giving our views on it. I think it caught everyone by surprise pretty much. Connor Goldson has since given an interview to Rangers TV, and on signing that new deal, he says he's really happy. Obviously, I've been here for a long time. I've been here for 4 years, and everybody knows I had a decision to make, and I went away with my family over the last week, and we made that decision, which was to stay here. We're all settled here. My family is settled here. And football-wise, I'm happy. I thought this was the right decision to make. And I'm really happy that I've made it. I've got the data stew on it, Johnny. I think everyone's in the same boat. I know Stevie Clifford has written a piece for the website today. Great start to the summer. You'd have to say that Rangers don't need to go out and try and find a replacement for Connor Goldson. He's staying at the club for the next 4 years. It's a tremendous statement of intent, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a real boon for Rangers. I mean, yesterday we were all a bit shocked when the news came through. I think if everyone is being honest, there was very few people in the Rangers support or people that cover Rangers, even in the media, that would have thought Connor Goldson would have been staying on. We absolutely said that we thought he was going to depart. It seemed obvious that was what was going to be the case. There's obviously big names in terms of the clubs sniffing around, Premier League clubs abroad. So it seemed that Connor Goldson, the age he was, 29, final big contract, was going to do something which you can totally understand, which was set him and his family up for the rest of their life with a big move. He's decided that he wants to stay in Rangers, wants to stay in Glasgow, that he's very settled. He signed a very lucrative deal, Derek. There's no doubt about that. But I think crucially, and I said this yesterday, I just want to repeat it, crucially, this is a deal that's good for Rangers, good for the player. Everyone's happy with it. This has not broken the wage ceiling. Connor Goldson will be one of the best paid players in Scotland, but Rangers haven't had to go and kind of break that strict ceiling that they have to do this deal. So it's been worked on over many months. A lot of effort has gone into ensuring that this is something that everyone's happy with. And Derek, the information that I've got is that, this was never going to be a deal that was just going to be pushed over the line. Rangers almost had to take a different type of strategy on this one and be very patient and just give Connor Goldson the time and space to make a decision, a proper decision over time. And he had to assess all his options. And ultimately, he's chosen at the end of that to sign another 4-year deal with the club. That puts him on course for an 8-year spell. If he has another couple of years at the end of that, that'll bring him to a testimonial year, which would be quite remarkable. But it looks like Connor Goldson has effectively committed the rest of his career, certainly the major part of his career and his best years, to Rangers. And we can talk for hours about what Connor Goldson gives, because there's no doubt in my mind, Derek, he's been absolutely outstanding since he was brought in. I know he has his critics. I don't agree with his critics. He's not the perfect defender, but I think if you look at the guy who walked through the door from Brighton when he first signed, people thought, yeah, he looks like a decent player, but he's come on leaps and bounds in the 4 years. So Rangers have got a better player now than they had when he came through the door, and he was pretty damn good when he came through the door. But he's lifted his level as he's got used to playing for this club. He brings leadership. He brings an Iron Man durability. You know, he plays every game, very, very rarely injured. Carries himself in the right way, a real leader in the dressing room. People who were attending the games when there was no fans in the media were always telling us there's one player that rings out in terms of his voice during these games, and that's Connor Goldson. I mean, Derek, I think you were at a couple of these closed door games yourself, so you'll know it yourself. Ultimately, you just can't put a price on what he brings. It's big money to have gone out and replace him like for like. And I thought Rangers were pretty smart in getting John Souttar, but that John Souttar deal now has to be seen in a whole different light, because that seemed like a natural replacement for Goldson, because John Souttar brings that carrying the ball. He's got a good ping on him. He can play long balls with really good accuracy. He's quick, decent on the ball, can play on the right side of a back three. But now, if he's got to play with Goldson, suddenly you think he's not left-footed John Souttar, but really does help you bring the ball out quickly. And that might give Rangers a bit more teeth, a bit more penetration when they're playing a back four, but also ideally suited for a back three, if that's what Van Bronckhorst wants to do. And I said this in the piece that I did yesterday. I've done a piece detailing behind the scenes what was going on. And ultimately, the big thing is now Van Bronckhorst has got incredible options at the back. Really, you don't have to worry about the defence for Rangers. They've got the players there that means that it's completely, the foundations are absolutely rock solid. And he can go away now and focus on those forward areas, which is where Rangers need the vast majority of the surgery, and bring in players who can give you those goals and assists that can take you to a title.
Yeah. So there's a question that came in saying Goldson is a winner, which I totally agree with, and he gave that as one of his reasons for staying as well. I found this interesting where he says, I've got used to winning games most weeks, and I love that feeling. I want to keep on winning. I want to keep on trying to take this football club to the next level. I said last year that I want to stay and try and win 56 and 57, and that was a massive part of me committing to the football club. I spoke to Ross Wilson, I spoke to the manager and said we wanted to do it. We were very happy to go ahead. But he says, like I said, I want to stay here and try and win. That's the main reason for me staying. Yeah, Rangers has got under his skin, and seen a comment saying if he went to the likes of Villa or Forest, he's going to be losing most. Well, maybe Villa not so much, but losing most weeks. You would have to say fighting at relegation would be a realistic challenge for him next year. Whereas Rangers, it's totally different. They don't even compare. They're not in the same ballpark, so you can see why that sort of appealed to him to stay where he was. Some other questions coming in that are very interesting now. A lot of folks just say now, Johnny, time to get Bassey signed up now. Of course, there was a reported interest from clubs down south. We understand that there's been no sort of official approach towards Rangers with regards to Bassey, but we've got a contract piece coming out on the website tomorrow, folks. But in terms of Bassey, Johnny, would he be one that you think should be a priority for Ross Wilson to try and get him tied down?
Of course, Derek. Of course. I mean, he deserves an upgrade. I understand that Calvin Bassey is one of the lowest paid players in the squad. You know, he's still on that kind of development contract that he initially signed when he first came to the club. So he's not on a contract that reflects his status in the team as man of the match in a Europa League final and Scottish Cup final, you know, delivering on the big occasion. That's something that Rangers will need to look at. But I just wonder, mate, I've got to be honest about Calvin Bassey. Rangers need to, as part of their business model, sell players, right? So this summer, there's going to be a painful departure or two. There's no doubt about it. And I actually think the club needs to do this, not because it needs it financially, Derek, but because it needs to freshen up the areas of the team that needs freshening up, and that is the forward areas. You can't do that for brass buttons. You can't do that on the cheap. It needs a bit of investment. So for me, I really think that Calvin Bassey, if you get that kind of money that Rangers, I think, are looking for, the kind of £25 million mark, it's probably a perfect time to sell on the back of that incredible Europa League run. His ticket is probably as good as it's ever going to be, Derek. Yeah. Now, do I want Calvin Bassey to go? Of course not. Of course you want to see this talented young player continue at Rangers. Of course you do. But there's also a reality. And Rangers as a club, I think, deserve a lot of credit for being upfront from the get-go under this board about the player trading model being an important part of the way the club runs. Not even an important part. One of the 4 pillars of the business, Derek. And we've seen the Nathan Patterson sale. I think that was a great deal. But it doesn't stop with Nathan Patterson. Rangers have got a great squad with a lot of value in it. And I, for one, if Rangers can fulfil the top dollar for Calvin Bassey, I'd be disappointed to see the player leave. But I'd also know that the club had really, really shown that they could turn over someone and make serious cash, and that player trading model was working, and that the club's financial health is absolutely robust. Now, I already think the club's in great hands. I think the board have done a great job from a financial point of view and a commercial point of view, and are developing things forward. But there has to be a bit of pain, I think, for supporters in that good players will leave. And you have to kind of understand the process around that. If you can get Calvin Bassey to sign a new deal, I'll be on here telling everyone what a terrific piece of business it is. And I do believe that, Derek. Yeah. But at the same time, if that's difficult, I think now's absolutely the time to sell while his star is on the rise to such an obvious extent. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I sort of tend to agree. I think I sort of agree with Ross. If an offer of upwards of £25 million was to come in, you need to discuss that, because that is an awful lot of money for the football club to knock back. So who knows? A team might come in. I would have no qualms if Bassey were to stay. I think in his last season was his first proper season playing consecutive men's football, and look at the improvement in him. I'd love to see Giovanni van Bronckhorst develop him even more. I think he has the potential to get even better. And it's a really exciting time both for Rangers and for Calvin Bassey. If he were to go, I can see him playing quite comfortably in the Premier League. We've talked about his attributes before. You've talked about it being a sort of like a cheat code in terms of his recovery pace, Johnny. He's that good. And I think England might just be regretting not capping him, being based on the fact that he's played for Nigeria. But yeah, it's certainly one to watch. Simple kind of man that gets in touch here. He says he'd punt Katic, Simpson, and maybe Hollander too. There's going to be some players that need to leave, Johnny. Katic, I think, he struggled to see if he's got a Rangers future. Ditto Jack Simpson. Hollander is been plagued with injuries. I think Roof falls into that category as well. Rangers can't rely on guys like Hollander and Roof. For Katic and Simpson, we know how Katic had his injury problems. Simpson, I just don't think is good enough.
Yeah, it's a really difficult one, Derek, because Kemar Roof is a top player in my view. Yeah. I think he's a terrific player. When he's fit, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind. I don't actually think there's that much difference between him and Morelos in terms of overall quality. I think Morelos brings you certain things, and Roof brings you certain things that are a bit different. They're both really effective. And if you got Kemar Roof in real good condition, you'll get a real good bang for your buck from him. So I know what you're saying, but I really like him as a player, Derek. I think he's quality. Philip Hollander's exactly the same. He's not quick, really good defender though. Good in the air, moves the ball quickly out the back. It's not maybe his most obvious skill, but he's still good enough, and I think he's excellent from a domestic point of view because his kind of physicality, his raw power, sets him apart. And in terms of siege defending, if you're in Europe against a good team, I mean, he's the best defender of the club in my view, from that point of view. So these guys, I totally know what you're saying, but you're loath to see that kind of quality going out the door. Absolutely agree with you on Jack Simpson. Don't think that's worked out, that move. I think it's best for him, best for the club if he moves on. In terms of, who was the other player you mentioned, sorry? At the back.
Ruth Hollander, Simpson, Katic.
Katic, we've talked about. I don't think that's going to work out because of his ability in terms of bringing the ball out from the back and passing it out. He's going to be primarily right-sided in a back three. Okay, he can play left side of a back four. And we saw that when he first came at the club, and he was pretty good. It'll be interesting on that one. I think he's got the potential to become more a part of things. I think it's important to remember as well, when you're thinking about Katic's future, if Giovanni Van Bronckhorst is going to move to a back three and switch between a 3 and a 4, it means you do need more than 4 centre-halves. If you're playing a back 4 all the time, 4 centre-halves is more than enough to get you through the season, especially if you've got a young lad like Leon King there who can come in for certain games. If you're playing a back 3 more, you probably need 6. You know, that's what you need to just keep churning things over, because there's going to be injuries. There's going to be games where you're wanting to swap players in and out because there's so many games. If you're a successful Rangers side, as we saw this season, it's going to be 50, 60 games a season, and that is just a lot of pressure to put on players. Yeah. So I think these will be big factors in how Giovanni Van Bronckhorst wants to take up the squad and ensure the makeup of the squad is sufficient for what he wants. But at the back, I think now we're looking at more maybe sort of clipping away at what's already there as opposed to adding to it, because you've got Suter, you've got Goldson, you've got Bassey, you've got Leon Balogun still to have his future decided. We've not even touched on him. We know Leon King's a real talent and needs game time. Then you talked about Jack Simpson and Katic. There's just so much there. And, of course, you've got James Sands and John Lundstrom who can fit into the middle of that. So there's so many options at the moment, and there's probably too many options, Derek, let's be honest.
Yeah. Before we touch on an interview that Joe Aribo has given, a friend of the website, Graham Hanna, gets in touch. He says, in terms of player trading, you think there are any players that Michael Beale would want at QPR? Of course, unveiled as the new manager at QPR yesterday. And good luck to him. I hope he does really well down at Loftus Road. The players that we talked about, I wouldn't be surprised if Michael Beale was perhaps inquiring about them, but who knows what he's going to find there at QPR. I think he's got the basis of a good squad, a nucleus of a good squad there. It remains to be seen if he's going to come and try and take any players down from Rangers with him. But if he wants the top draw players, Johnny, then he needs a lot of money to take some of them down. Could you see the likes of, perhaps, I know we've mentioned like a Joe Aribo and what have you, but for me, he plays in the Premier League as opposed to dropping down into the Championship, which we'll touch on very shortly, Joe Aribo. But can you see him come out and trying to bring any former players he's worked with down the road with him?
So I know a bit about QPR, and certainly over the last couple of years, and certainly their budget has been lower end of the Championship, maybe, I don't know, between sort of 16th and 18th in terms of the amount of cash they have to spend on wages. And they really haven't been spending on transfer fees, Derek. I don't think Mark Warburton's really splashed the cash over that 2 years that he spent stabilising the club. Now, they've got owners who have got a bit of cash, so it might well be that they're wanting to throw a bit of money at it now and try and take that squad to the next level, because if you get to the Premier League promised land, even if it's just for one season, not only do you get the money from the single season, but then you've got the 2 years of parachute payments. That is a huge influx of money. So perhaps they think Michael Beale's the man, they'll back him financially, and he'll be able to go and do that. And I just wonder if the kind of money they'll have would be enough to kind of prize some of the real top class players like a Joe Aribo or a Ryan Kent away to go down to the Championship. Yeah. I'd be surprised, mate. I really would be surprised. You never underestimate the pool of somebody like Michael Beale, of a city like London, and of big wages. But I think that if Michael Beale's going to come in for players, it's maybe more likely to be more kind of fringe players that Rangers are looking to offload rather than Michael Beale coming in and taking a Rangers first team player. I think that would seem to me to be quite unlikely based on what I know about QPR, but listen, as I say, you don't know. They could be turning around saying we're going to put money behind it, and money talks a lot of the time in football. So we'll have to see, but I would expect Michael Beale probably to be shopping in a slightly less expensive market than some of these Rangers players who might be going out the door.
Yeah, but I like this point from our William, who says, will Connor extending maybe help the others extend? I think that may play a part in negotiations. Players that may be undecided about staying. I think by seeing the vice captain sign that extension, I think it may just tempt one or two more to consider staying as well. So it'll be interesting to see over the course of the summer. Let's touch on this radio interview that Joe Aribo's given in Nigeria, Johnny. Touching on the season, he says it's been a long season and I have played a lot of games. For me, it was a good season. When I look at my numbers stat-wise, I think I have a lot to be happy about, but I wanted more, especially when you compare the numbers I was coming up with in the first part of the season compared with the second half of the season. And I was also disappointed that we couldn't win the Europa League. Failing to qualify for the World Cup was a huge disappointment for me too. It was hard for me coming back to Rangers after that for some time, but I just had to say to myself that God has a plan and wasn't to be for some reason, but we can't question God. God knows best. The line in there that's interesting for me, Johnny, is his failure to qualify for the World Cup with Nigeria affected him for some time. We were all saying that. I think, well, I'm not too sure if it was near to the African Cup of Nations, but when he went away for Nigeria and he came back, he just wasn't the same player. He looked jaded. He looked mentally in desperate need of a rest. And unfortunately, Rangers just couldn't afford to give him one at that stage of the season. But that sort of explains it. Before he went away with Nigeria, he was head and shoulders the best player in Scotland.
Yeah, he was in a terrific vein of form, wasn't he? And he had improved big style under Giovanni van Bronckhorst. You would say that Bassi and Aribo were the two that really showed, I think, in the early few games that they'd moved up a gear, and obviously later John Lundstrom obviously came onto a game as well. But as you see, the minute he went away and came back from the African nations, he just didn't look like the same player. It's a lot of travel, Derek. It's a lot of stress. It's a lot of, the Nigerian players are put under real pressure to perform. There's a real expectation in that country, and rightly so, because they've been one of the most successful nations over the last 30 years in African football, and are always up there with the favourites for any of these competitions. And we know that Nigerian football supporters are absolutely fervent in supporting the Super Eagles. So you go away there and you go through that kind of disappointment on top of the overplaying element to it. And I think Joe Aribo has maybe played more football than anyone else in Europe. I think there's a stat going around like that. He's played more minutes than anyone else. And he probably just needed to be rested, to be honest. And he's admitted that himself. We all saw it. And I actually think Joe Aribo came back onto a game maybe around April, early April, and started to give a little bit more for the team. But he was never quite that same force. But I suppose that from a tactical point of view, and Joshua could probably talk about this a little bit more in detail than I can, but he was very much a focal point, wasn't he, under Giovanni van Bronckhorst, who kind of played that number 10, the traditional number 10, in the first 10 games or so. And then Giovanni van Bronckhorst adapted it after that, didn't he? After the 3-0 defeat at Parkhead, and started to get the wingers more into play, well, the fullbacks more into play in terms of going forwards. And Aribo had to maybe take a slightly backwards step in terms of his own role in the team and where he would naturally like to play. And I was speaking to somebody again who's a background in football scouting, football analytics, and this guy was telling me he thought Joe Aribo was his favourite player at Rangers, basically, because from a scouting point of view, if you're a scout, he's a guy that a manager will love if you take him to the manager, because he can play in so many positions. We've seen Joe Aribo play deep in midfield. We've seen him play advanced as number 10. We've seen him play right wing. We've seen him play up front. We've seen him play left back. And Joe Aribo never looks uncomfortable in any of those positions. Even as a sort of central striker, he showed flashes that, crikey, maybe Joe Aribo could be a central, maybe he could be a target man. He was that good. I'm not saying he's not Alfredo Morelos, but as somebody who was just chucked in there, I think he's pretty good. He scored the goal. That was a striker's finish, really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So he's a guy that just has natural, innate quality to kind of play in any position. And if he puts it all together, what a player Joe Aribo can be. He really, really does have every box ticked, every skill set that you could possibly want. And he's absolutely ideal for the Premier League in terms of his raw physique, his power, his size, his frame. And I think Steven Gerrard once said, he likes to see Joe Aribo play angry because he's a bit too laid back. And when he plays angry, you can see the difference. And I think that's great advice and a great observation from Steven Gerrard because he's just got everything. He just needs to start really utilising those tools that he's been given.
Yeah. Do you reckon he'll be a Rangers player next season, Johnny? I know we're very early in the summer. There's always talk about him possibly leaving. There's a comment actually that came in saying, do you think his head might have been turned by an offer around about January time? I'm not so sure. I know that Crystal Palace were sniffing about, but I'm not so sure there was much substance in that. But in terms of confidence, could you see him laying up for Rangers next season?
I'd be disappointed, Derek, and I'll tell you why. Again, to go back to this whole idea of the player trading model, you just can't be letting players run down their contracts. It's just not smart business. Now, Rangers have got away with it with Connor Goldson. They've done well in terms of the strategy around that, but it's very unusual what we saw with Connor Goldson. Let's not beat around the bush.
Yeah,
you don't often see players run down their contract to the last day and then re-sign.
I don't think I've ever seen that. I think the only time that sort of kind of happened in a roundabout way was Soti Kyrgiakos when he went out of contract, tried to find another club, couldn't, and then signed a new deal with Rangers. But this was obviously vastly different. But that's the only player that comes to my mind where that has happened. Yeah,
so it's pretty unusual, and it's not something you want because it's putting the aces in the hands of the player, really, fundamentally. And the club want to have the aces in their hands.
Yeah.
I think there's a fair bit of work needs to be done on this squad in terms of getting the contract situations all sorted out and ensuring that this kind of what we've seen doesn't really happen again. Where I would give the club the benefit of the doubt, Derek, and I think this is a really important point about the realpolitik of what's actually happened in the last couple of years. COVID absolutely destroyed the football transfer market in the area that Rangers operate in. That sort of £5 to £20 million transfer that will be bread and butter for this player trading model has been decimated because the kind of clubs that can afford that kind of transfer have been hammered over the COVID period by not having fans in and the various effects on commercial deals, etc., etc. We've seen that across Europe. I've heard that from executives at clubs, and I know for a fact that that's been an issue for Rangers. They've been well aware of that, and I think some of these players would have been turned over last summer, but they weren't because of specifically the collapse of the transfer market around this kind of price point. I think that is now clicking back into gear, and you're going to start to see that kind of deal moving once again, Derek. So I think we've got through to the other end, but that has had a big impact on, I think, Rangers' ability to make these kind of transfers that would allow them to reinvest and rebuild the squad a little bit more readily than they have. Yeah.
Okay, folks, that'll do us here. Thanks to everyone for getting in touch, as ever, with the programme. Apologies if we never got to your comment. As I mentioned earlier on as well, look at the ticker below. We've still got that great offer on the website just now, just £6 for the next 6 months on the Rangers Review site. Just head over to rangersreview.co.uk/subscribe. You pay your £6. That's you sorted for the 6-month period. It really is a sensational deal we've got on the website. Okay, we'll be back again tomorrow at the usual time of 9:30. But until then, enjoy the rest of your Thursday afternoon.